Today on the show, we're going to talk to Steve the Hamre. He is the National Recruiting Manager for Lithia Motors. And what we're going to cover is, what was it like recruiting technicians 5 years ago versus today? Should we tell customers the truth? The key to retaining technicians, and will service advisors become obsolete in the future? That and much more coming up on Service Drive Revolution. Welcome everybody to Service Drive Revolution. We have an exciting show like always for you. Today, we have a special guest. Very special. Super special. Steve Hamre. Did I say it right?
You betcha.
How many people get your last name?
Most people just call me Hammer, and I just go with it.
Hammer!
That's kind of a cool name.
Works for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, as always, Christian, the in-house math expert and comedian, is here.
Yes.
Christian and I were talking to a guy a couple minutes ago, and that we threw out some numbers, and Christian just like grabs the answer out of the air and is like,
That's awesome.
he could figure out the ELR just in his head, like instantly.
Service managers can't do that half.
No, I'm getting out my calculator, well, my phone that has a calculator, and I was asking him, like, when you think about numbers, do you see them in colors, or like, how are you? And he said he did. Like, he sees colors when he sees numbers.
That's awesome.
So he's a little Rain Man-ish. If you need any help.
I'm lacking in that area, so I'll have to,
Me too. I have to revert.
And just like Rain Man, I'm also an excellent driver.
That you're not.
Nice.
Not even close. Today we're going to talk about two things. Should you tell the customers the truth? And the marketplace when it comes to hiring and recruiting, which you're an expert at.
Doing my best.
So
absolutely.
we're gonna try to lean on your expertise, and I'm curious how you see the future and what you see coming on the horizon, because there's obviously a lot of changes in that. It's great to have you back, Christian. Christian's been on the road for seems like
Way too long.
Way too long. We missed you in the office. It's great. Yeah, we were kind of talking about that, but the travel now, everything's opening up, and we're back on the road.
It was nice having everything to ourselves.
No more
for
rows
about a
to
year.
yourself,
Yeah.
man.
I like my bed.
God, no
And I
kidding.
like my bulldog. No
kidding.
I miss my dog.
Yeah. No airport delays. It was pretty great for about, 9 months, 10 months?
We really only had it was like middle of March through June. We didn't travel at all, but like July through September, October, man, it was so beautiful. Just walking into the airport 3 minutes before the flight takes off, just like Chris would always want.
Hotel upgrades were phenomenal.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I got a suite out at that H Hotel at the LAX, and they bumped me up to a suite.
Yeah,
and
that's
it was
a nice
like
place.
2 different zip codes. I felt it was huge.
Yeah.
It was nice.
First class every flight,
Yep.
right?
Oh yeah.
It was so much
Nobody
fun.
next to you.
Nope.
Like, great. Now it's like people breathing on you the whole thing.
Heard it in.
Okay, so do you have an opinion on this, Steve? Should you tell customers the truth? Should you always, you're married, right?
Yes.
Okay. I understand that sometimes you're not going to tell your wife the truth. There's just certain situations, and honestly, your wife probably understands that she doesn't want you to tell the truth. And so we could take a situation like, honey, do these jeans make my ass look fat? Maybe an opportunity not to tell the truth if considering the situation, right? There's situations where you would rather show love and empathy, and telling the truth isn't always the best scenario.
Right.
But with customers, I think one of my advantages against other advisors in the same service drive was that I would always tell the customers the truth. And sometimes there was a price to pay for that, right? So like, let's say, I rode service in the University District in Seattle, right? And so these college girls would come in and they'd bought a used Jetta. They didn't know not to buy the 16 valve, like whatever, right? And so they'd come in this Jetta GLI and the technician would come back, and you literally, the inspection sheet would just
Pages.
And so first of all, like to do an estimate like that takes, I don't know, it could take 45 minutes, an hour.
Absolutely.
And so most advisors just be like, the car isn't worth it, it's junk, forget it, right? And I don't know, maybe because I was young, maybe because I just felt like that was a part of the job. Maybe it's because my service manager, when I finally convinced him to let me be an advisor, he said if I dropped below 2.5 hours per hour, I was fired. So maybe that was a motivator.
That's definitely a motivator.
There was something going on. But I would actually do it. And then I would call this poor college girl and I'd say, hey, we noticed some things with your Jetta.
Yeah.
And, and then I would go through them.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point, though, even in talking to your wife. And when I used to write service, I was probably a lot like you. But one time, I'll never forget, it was a 94 Jeep Cherokee, and it had that list. But I did it honestly, and I told the gentleman, I said, I'd love to help you with all this, but I think a better idea is I'm going to go get a salesman that I trust, and it might be time to move on from this. And that customer actually appreciated that so much and loved that car so much, he actually did all the work. And it was $6,500 back in 2003. I mean, it was crazy. But I agree with you on the truth part of it. I do think you have to take into respect of the customer and sort of how they're going to take things and maybe evolve your truth a little bit to fit what they want to hear or need to hear. But I think any good advisor's job is to prioritize as well, right? These are the safety issues. These are the things that, if we're going to drive our kids around in that car, we need to do. Here's the other things to prolong its life or do the maintenance. But yeah.
You could probably say that up front. You could say, hey, the car is, 12 years old or whatever. It needs some stuff. But some are important and some maybe could be put off. But let's just go through it.
Absolutely.
And you could say that up front to ease the tension a little bit.
Told people, you don't want to chop down the whole orchard. You got to prune it a little bit so it'll grow and they'll come and buy more, right? I mean,
I had this customer at a Cadillac Oldsmobile dealership that I wrote service at for a year. I was there for a year exactly. And the first time she came in, so she had this Oldsmobile, I forget, like Cutlass or whatever it is. And she wanted an enterprise car or whatever. And I remember remember the first time I helped her, she got an enterprise car, we did whatever, and then she came back with the enterprise car and she comes up to my desk and she goes, so when you rent a car and you get the insurance, like you say yes to the insurance, it really is insurance, right?
Insurance awesome. That we stay in business.
And I'm like, well, I think so. Like it's enterprise. Like, yeah, but I think so. And she's like, okay, good. And then she walks over and she's taking out the side of the car. So she was the best. She was so funny. But I remember her car needed a bunch of work and it was the same sort of thing. Like, I'm like, it needed a lot of work. We're talking about like $8,000 on a car that's worth $2 million.
Right.
And so same thing, I tell her like, hey, it's time. I would not put any more money into this car. And she goes, no, I want to do it. And she had money.
Yeah.
She wanted to do it. And I forced her to go look at cars. But you know what the weird thing was? The reason why she wouldn't get a new Oldsmobile? Because the shifter was on the column.
Oh.
That was her hang up. And she said, I'll be buried in this car. Like when I die, they can bury me in it. But I hate the shifter in the middle. I want the shifter on the column.
Right. Yep.
And there were no more cars with the shifter on the column.
They get attached to some things. And a lot of times, it's just one little thing in that car that's their thing. And
I remember my service manager wanted the money up front. Because he's like, this thing is not worth $8,000.
You got to give an $8,000 deposit on an $8,500.
I also remember that after we did the $8,000, a week later, she comes back and it needed a radiator.
Oh, geez.
That sucks. God. Well, I remember.
But the good thing is we know your car. We'll get it done fast.
I told her that the $8,000 might not be I'm like, we're going down a road here that once we pull the rope, we don't know what's coming with it.
You tear into stuff.
So she paid for the radiator. Like it wasn't, But But she was the best. Like, I just remember that. So the insurance, when you check that you buy the insurance, it's real insurance, right? And I'm like, yeah, I think her name was Marilyn. I'm like, yeah, Marilyn, I think so. And she goes, okay. Well, here it is. Like, and that was the deal we had with Enterprises. They would drop it off with us. We would call them, and then somebody would come down and get it.
Right. Yeah,
that rep coming down, and I go, "Hey, the insurance." I did that to the poor Enterprise kid. So funny.
A lot of work.
I remember when I used to have the luxury of thinking like you guys and being honest with the customers.
You have to be honest with the customers.
And let me tell you why, because I have actually eyewitnessed an example of when we should not be honest with customers. So I'm in, let's call it the heartland of America. Okay.
Texas?
Oklahoma.
Okay.
Specifically.
So you're on a cattle ranch in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I always like the joke that you do about where it's that kind of area where you can let your dog run for 3 days and you can still see it. This is where
I always say that about Odessa or Midland, Texas. Like you can watch your dog run away for 2 or 3 days.
No doubt.
So we're in the store and customer needs a whole bunch of work done to their vehicle and the advisor was new. So he's like, well, I don't really know how to explain all this stuff. And he's like, I'm going to go and grab the technician and have him come and talk to you.
This is a smart thing to do.
Yeah, I think so too.
You don't want to BS.
Technician.
Right.
We have to make sure that he doesn't bite, right?
Yeah, and I don't know exactly where
clearly
this
a new advisor wouldn't pick the wrong technician.
No, never. So we go back and they get the technician and technician comes up and customer looks at the technician. She says, "What's wrong with my car?" And the technician looks her right in the eyes and says, "It's a piece of shit. That's what's wrong with it. You need to get rid of that thing. And by the way, your looks fat in your jeans." And
they didn't say that.
I totally had that part. But at that point, I'm like, maybe we don't always need to be honest with our customers.
Well, or we need to choose our words in explaining the car. But yeah, I understand your point for sure. And you definitely
you don't need to be blunt, but you could be honest.
She was so sad.
I mean, the thing I remember about riding service that way and calling the college girl and telling her, your GTI or GLI or whatever it was, the Jetta GLI, right? Mm-hmm. Needs $4,700 worth of work. They start crying.
Yep.
It's a whole thing. And then you hang up and you feel terrible for a minute. And then an hour later, they're like, "Chris, there's a guy on the phone for you." And you're like, "Hello, this is Chris. This is Tom, Janet's dad.
Oh, yeah.
So what does it need?"
What are you crooks trying to do to my daughter?
No, here's the credit card.
That's perfect.
And so dad doesn't want his daughter, away at college. And so at the end of the day, you feel like maybe you did a good thing by telling him the truth. And dad wanted it all done because he didn't want to worry. And so I think telling the truth tactfully, not your car's a piece of POS, but.
And I think there's something to the fact that we also, with any kind of conversation we have, but especially with customers, is you can put them in a position where they're ready to receive it, right? Uh-huh. And I remember a lot of times there were certain things that I said in his advisor. I'd say, "Now I've got a few things that we need to go over. I want to get through the entire list, and then after I'm done with that, if you have any questions," right? Perfect. And I also kind of had that thing, and it sounds like what you guys did too, where you turn something over to sales, and I would give the whole estimate, and I would be like, "It's possible that the amount of the repair exceeds the value of the car, but you have to decide that." Sure. So I always said, I think the big thing that advisors need to remember is that they do not have the right or the responsibility to make a decision for a customer on what should or shouldn't be presented or bought.
Absolutely.
Like they have to give that to the customer, and that's where the honesty thing comes in.
And I think prioritizing it is very important too. You can make that list look less imposing by saying, "Hey, if we cover these 3 things today, that car is going to be safe for your family. And then if you want, we can look at the flush or the transmission flush or whatever else." But I do believe you need to present it all. Plus, that's the other thing. Let's say you don't present it all. And customer goes down to Down the Road Motors, and Down the Road Motors presents them with everything. Now they think that you had a terrible inspection, you're hiding things from them, whatever else. I mean, if you tell it, show them everything, you can sleep at night, right? You did your job, I feel like.
If I ever questioned it, I would ask the technician to show me. Yep. So I would say, I'd get the keys, we'd go out to the car. And if I had to get on the ground and, with the flashlight, I'd be like, "Explain it to me." And, you know, I would have technicians. If there's 25 techs in the shop, there might be a couple guys that pencil whip cars.
Sure.
And so all I would do in that situation is I could prioritize for the customer. This is way off in the distance sort of thing. I remember my first couple of encounters with MPI, the digital thing, it would mark if it was yellow. And so you'd have techs that'd be like, well, the belt isn't perfect. So, there's a little seepage.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden it's like, this car needs $6,000 worth of work, but really it needed 500.
Right.
So checking.
And I think an advisor's relationship with his tech or his team of techs is incredibly important in that. And it's sort of like winning fixes everything. You start selling for a tech, they're going to teach you more. Yeah. They're going to be very open to discussing things with you. And that's an important task to put on an advisor to get not only those relationships with the customers, but you got to have the relationship with the technician, right? I mean, it's hyper important for all of that.
Even if the techs just know that you tried and you communicate back with them, like I'd go back and I would just say like, hey, they're thinking about it, but pull it off and I tried. Just Correct. That, because a lot of times techs don't hear anything and then they just assume that you let it go.
Absolutely.
So that communication with the tech and that relationship is everything for you as an advisor.
Amen.
If they don't believe in you and they don't believe that if they take the time, because it is their time, if they take the time to inspect it and you're not going to present it,
well, when I talk to tech candidates, even at the schools now, I show them an MPI and I say the most important tool in your box you'll ever have, you may not know this, is going to be a piece of paper. It's the inspection form.
That's pretty smart.
Because that's what makes you your whole career, right? It establishes trust. That's what we sell from. It shows the advisor you're doing your job. And I just think that that's an important point that they need to learn getting into.
Well, that's an amazing frame up front for them for you to plant that seed in their minds, and that tool, because they're thinking tools are like
and they stop pencil whipping it. You're not going to make any money if you do this and your advisor just throws it out and starts talking to the customer on their own. I mean, you're not going to make any money anyway. So.
Yeah, you should also ask every tech coming in this next question: what dies but never lives?
Oh.
Should ask every tech what dies but never lives. What?
A battery.
God, I was hoping it would be so much more profound.
A lot of people have thought that before.
That's a common feeling around here with Christian's jokes.
Wait, there's not more?
That's it? Okay. That's awesome.
Steve obviously has a higher value for his time than the comedy.
Not true. Gotta have comedy.
Noted.
No, not at all.
That's so funny. Okay, Steve. Let's talk about hiring and recruiting. And should we start back? I don't know. Should we go back 5 years?
Sure.
So 5 years ago, what were the secrets to recruiting techs, advisors, service managers?
Great question. And so I met you 7 years ago when you first came out and did a 20 group with us at Lithia Motors. And the difference between then and now is just substantial. Money was the key. Money was the key for recruiting technicians, for getting people to really look at vocation. Really all they cared about was money. So to go 7 years in the future to today, incentivizing and making techs want to look at your company takes a lot more than just their flat rate wage and even some of the benefits. They're looking at different things to incentivize them now. So they're looking at quality of life. So they're looking at their scheduling. So if you're a service manager now and you think that every tech's going to want to work 6 days a week, from 8 in the morning till 6 at night, then there's a reason why you're not getting a lot of candidates to come and stay with your store. So creative scheduling. We have some of our stores now are actually doing 313s, and they align them in such a way that sometimes that tech actually has like 5 or 6 days off before that 3 comes down around. Now, obviously you have to have the volume, the physical plant and the team to support that, But that's one of the things, is just incentivizing these techs. The other is to really play on, the technology that's involved. There's a very good reason why we don't call them just mechanics anymore. We call them technicians. In fact, most schools, that part of the learning is tied into STEM. So there's a lot with the electronics and what they've learned, and make sure that they're going in the right direction to be able to handle it, to be able to jump in. And I really like going to some of the greater, vocational schools around the country. Wyotech in general has really come a long way with new ownership and a new focus, and see some of these recruits that they're getting and what they're putting into their brain. What people don't realize is they don't come out of a vocational school plug and play. One of the great things that the vocational schools do is really kind of teach them how to learn, because now we're going to put them through all their manufacturer's training, and on average that's another 7 years, up to about $110,000 worth of investment from the dealership per. So we have to find that right candidate that's ready to get that training and move on. Younger, I hate to use the word millennials because now there's all sorts of different words for people of that age, but they're actually, they're intrigued with that kind of learning, and they're excited to learn more. So if you can kind of get them on the path to do that, that's great. Take a step out of entry-level techs, and now we start talking about seasoned techs, and we've got a problem on our hands now, and I kind of equate it to the NBA. We have a lot of guys and gals that are jumping from sign-on bonus to sign-on bonus to sign-on bonus, and it can be very lucrative. So, how do we attract those techs that already have that training to one of our locations? And a lot of times what we're doing is we're searching all around the country for where is there a mass emigration? Where are there people leaving for, in mass? Now we can tie in like a store that we have in, say, Twin Falls, Idaho. Maybe it has all those things that the person that's leaving a big city is looking for. We use that in our ads. We use that in our, this might set the hook on them. You like fishing? It's 4 rivers that go right through there, and here's how you do it. So looking outside the box, looking where people are coming from, why they're leaving a certain area, what would attract them to one of our areas, those sort of things we're working on now.
So I'm going to unpack a little bit of that. So this happens all the time where I'll be talking to a dealer that's, let's just say they're in Waterloo, Iowa, right? And they'll do that typical, my market thing, and they'll say, well, it's hard to hire technicians here. You don't understand. You're in LA. and I what we have found is it's way easier to get somebody to relocate to Waterloo than it is to get somebody to come to LA. Because if you think about it in LA, if you're a technician, you're making, let's say you're a technician that's 28 to 30.
Okay.
So you're about to have your second kid, right? And you're making what, $30 an hour. Now you're going to make $30 an hour in Waterloo, but $30 an hour here doesn't even get you in the market of buying a house.
Absolutely.
You're sitting in traffic for 45 minutes to an hour each way. You have the frustration of the school system. If you want to go do something on the weekend, you got to drive an hour and a half to the desert to dirt bike or to the mountains. Now you go somewhere like Iowa and you can fish, you can dirt bike in your front yard, you can have a couple acres of property.
Absolutely.
And for $30 an hour, you can own property.
Right.
You all of a sudden are in control of your life. So for us, it's way harder in a bigger market to recruit techs, especially downtown. Like you're talking about downtown Chicago, downtown Seattle. It's harder to get techs to want to fight that traffic.
Right.
And that's where I see the premium and the alternative work schedules, 410s work in those situations. They're like, okay, I'll do it 4 days a week, and then I'll drive to Issaquah or whatever.
Be gone. Yeah.
I'm not driving 6 days a week to downtown Seattle or downtown Chicago.
Exactly. And I think you're looking for a little bit of a different animal. We have, I believe, 7 dealerships right downtown LA with Lithia Motors. And, to recruit them, you're looking for somebody that, wants that constant inflow of customers. They're never gonna have to wait for work. They can flag, 18, 19 hours in a day if they know what they're doing. They can work their butts off for those 3 or 4 days, and then, like you said, get out of town for a little bit and get back. So you have to know exactly what that dealership is good at, and some of the things that would incentivize somebody to work there. And then you also have to find the right person that LA is something that doesn't scare them off, and it's something that they enjoy. And we do have techs that like living in the city, and that's their life. They could never think about living where I live in Klamath Falls, Oregon, a little small agricultural community. So, it takes a lot of work for a recruiter to do the homework and then be really talking. I've tried to get my recruiters, now I have a team of 5, to tour all of their stores at least quarterly. And one of the biggest things I do and tell them is get immersed in that culture of that store. Figure it out, because you're going to be recruiting people there. You want to be able to answer some of the questions that won't show up on a web page or anything else. You know how that team works, what they do together and how they work together. How's that culture look? So, and it changes from service manager to service manager. And one of the things Lithia does that I think sets us, in front of a lot of things, we do let our service managers and our general managers run their individual business. So we're not like a corporation where everything's the same. So in order to stay on top of that, my recruiters need to be in those stores, get a taste of that culture, and figure out that there might be 2 stores across the street from each other that are very different in the way they're run.
But your recruiters are going to see a different point of view than the people that are in the store. That's the other great thing with that, right? So I can't tell you how many times I'll be in a store and they'll be like, yeah, there's nothing special about this. But then I'll see like this gorgeous lighting in the shop, and it's like really, really clean, and it's a beautiful service drive, and like a never-ending pile of customers and stuff like that. But they're in the business all day long. They don't see that. But your recruiters coming in, they need to take note of that. And I would probably say that I'd have a physical note on each store, like what some selling advantage are. Selling advantages.
Look out back behind the shop. If there's some grills sitting out there, oh, you guys must do barbecues.
Yeah, you do monthly barbecues, do you do that? Is it team building?
Yeah, so those things we can help sell.
Yeah, in those smaller markets too, oftentimes the service manager's been there 20 years, and that's where they've been. So they don't understand that when you come from somewhere else, they really do have something special.
Absolutely.
It's just their day-to-day, burden to carry. They don't understand that if they went somewhere else, it's harder.
Right, absolutely.
So having the outside recruiters come in with a different perspective helps bridge that in a sense, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to think about the pay in downtown LA. I mean, $30 an hour for a tech, it's a really nice 2-bedroom tent on Figueroa.
God, I can't even imagine.
What do you think about the homeless here?
So I travel all around the country. We have stores in I think 23 states now. And it's certainly not just Los Angeles that's having that problem now. If you go to Seattle, if you go to Portland, quite a few other places.
Is it worse in Seattle?
I wouldn't say it's worse, but it's certainly on par. And I would say that Portland may be a little bit worse, actually.
Than LA? Mm-hmm. Wow,
just where they're letting them go. It seems like LA, there's, underpasses. They're always there. And Portland, they seem to be like taking over city parks and stuff that really wasn't set aside. And I'm not trying to put an opinion on right, wrong, or indifferent on it, but I mean, something's got to be worked out where we help them, but we also are able to have businesses and people to enjoy a park and that sort of thing.
I would have thought for sure that LA would win like the homeless Olympics.
I will say I haven't been all around, so
let us drive you around. We'll drop you off a couple places.
What do you think, Steve?
We'll come back and pick you up in an hour.
Go have a meth cooking party at MacArthur Park. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I know here the thing with the homeless thing is it's too complicated for elected officials who really have no experience fixing anything.
Right.
It's a popularity contest to get elected.
Absolutely.
Like our governor, he's really good looking, but he has no idea how to run a business or what he's doing. And when you talk about homeless, you've got different categories. You have vets, and that's a different fix than the mentally ill, than the drug addicts, than the down and out.
Absolutely.
And you have to be able to understand how to triage it and create scenarios while you have accountability. If you don't put accountability in place and you let them do whatever they want, then they don't desire to go get help. So if you open up a gate for them, they're not going to go through the gate if there isn't pressure pushing the other way.
Sure.
And they're not sophisticated. They don't have enough experience with, leading and actually having to create an outcome. Like if they ran a sales department in a car dealership for a year, they would have more leadership experience than they do in a popularity contest.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
That's the problem.
And I love your point. I mean, there's multiple problems that create homelessness. It's not one color fits everything. And that's, I think a lot of people go at that problem in that way, and you're not going to fix it.
But it'd be no different than recruiting. You can't. So like for technicians, if you said, well, it's just hourly rate, well, you're not going to win. If you said it's just the schedule, or you have to always be adapting and changing and paying attention to where it is to be effective.
Oh yeah, and I think one of the keys to retention in technicians in this whole world is something that Lithia has been working on for a long time. We do it better in some markets than other. Is fully growing your own techs. We say it, we talk about it, but unless that service manager and even that general manager nowadays has a buy-in to that, we're going to be fighting the same problem. We're always going to be looking for that master tech and whatever bad habits, whatever expensive, sign-ons that comes with that, and also the willingness for that person to jump to the next sign-on bonus. If we've grown that tech up from, wet behind the ears, out of vocational school, we put the training on them, they've grown up in our culture, retention is much better that way. And that brings in some of the older techs, rather than just putting them out to pasture, can we use them as a mentor? Can they maybe stop doing some of the heavy line, do mostly diagnostics, and then have 2 apprentices underneath them that they get paid a portion of that work? There's all sorts of things that we're implementing that will, lengthen a technician's career and allow us to grow better techs from the ground up. So that's a big part of it.
Do you find that stores that are really good at growing their own are also usually really good at recruiting? Are those two mutually independent skills?
Do you find sometimes when he interrupts that you don't know if he's telling a joke or
I've made sure to listen till the end now, but I think that is a phenomenal point. Are they better at recruiting? Absolutely, because they've got it down to a finite set. They're looking for an entry-level tech that they know will fit in that system and also have potential. So somebody that's got drive and ambition, right?
Which is attractive, right? At all levels.
Absolutely. And are they better at retention? Absolutely. You don't have 911s from a shop like that. I mean, unless something just horrible happens, they don't have 911s. They're always looking for that next, group. And some people, the entry-level candidates can feel that culture and want it so bad, they'll come on and be a porter for a while just to get their foot in the door, and then they start doing some lube work and everything else, and then they're in the door. So they've got 2 tiers below a C-level tech that they're actually bringing people in to get into the system. So
yeah, I think that's the thing with support staff. You should always be interviewing, thinking about what their next step is.
Absolutely.
Right?
And then referrals. Referrals is a huge deal. Making sure you have that relationship with your techs and your staff that, they know somebody where they used to work. Well, let's talk to them, because then I can get away all around all the gatekeepers, because now I have a contact right with that candidate, and that's a big thing.
So when you talk about growing your own, I think there's a couple things that as an industry that is missed. The first one is, and the stats that I've seen from manufacturers, is that technicians going into a quick lube environment, so a standalone quick lube environment, within the first 2 years, it's over 60% leave.
Absolutely.
But we also get married to this quick lube environment like it's a business model, while our profitability also goes the other way. Sure. And so understanding that having a better system in the shop for a quick lube, so a customer can experience an oil change in a reasonable amount of time, but you can still have those technicians mixed in and around the other ones and being mentored and having them in the shop, that dramatically cuts that turnover.
Sure.
And then I think the other one that's missed is whenever, McKinsey or these big consulting companies are hired to research why technicians leave our industry, the number one reason usually is they don't see a chance of advancement. They don't see a clear career path. They see this guy who's a shop foreman that's never going to leave.
Right. Yeah.
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
they don't ever, and nobody's talking to them about, hey, what are your plans? Or, where do you want to go? And then the second one is their boss. They don't believe.
Yep.
Their bosses never engage them in a personal, relationship. And so they don't feel like the boss cares about them. And so there's that gap. But those are always the first two. Money is like 4 or 5 on those lists.
Which would shock a lot of people, but you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think, that whole career path at the start, at the day of hire is so important. But then if that's all you do with that career path, then it's useless. If you don't have, say, a 30-day, meet and greet consultation with that employee as they're going through the career path, it's not a tool anymore. It just was a piece of paper you got for them to sit down. But every 30 days, if you're saying, hey, Mike, great job. You got these kicked out. You got some online training done. Here's what we're going to look at the next 30 days, and here's what that pay will look like. Mm-hmm. And I think our managers that do that consistently have a much better retention rate. They actually have a quicker growth pattern for their technicians as well. And you can weed somebody out, in that first 90 days pretty quick if you're actually on top of it and looking what their performance is and how they're following that career path. And sometimes, you got to punt. I mean, sometimes they're just probably never going to be able to handle that pace, and we either find a different spot for them in the dealership or whatever else we have to do. But there has to be expectations both ways, I think, too, for it to work.
So one thing I was really excited to talk to you about the future.
Sure.
And there's this book that we read. So have you ever heard of the company Stratfor?
I have not.
So Stratfor is like you'd call like an intelligence agency, like the CIA for business, basically.
Okay.
And so, in a lot of ways, maybe more effective because they're not encumbered by the same rules.
Gotcha.
But the guy who started Stratfor has written some books, and he wrote a book, and I want to say the book is 11 years old at this
2010?
point. Yeah.
Yep.
So 11 years old, and it's called The Next 100 Years.
Oh, wow.
And I would highly suggest that you
For
read
sure.
it. In the beginning of the book, he spends a lot of time talking about statistics, trends, and it's a little boring, but it picks up,
Sure.
But everything he says in there has been coming true.
Gotcha.
And one thing that he lays out very clearly is that our population is going down, not up. And that with our population going down, not up, the workforce, the labor force, right?
Sure.
Is shrinking. And so you see this already, that you can't find plumbers. You can't, there's all of these industries that are, severely affected by the lack of talent and labor and, plumbers, technicians, whatever it is. And he makes the point in there. And, this is pre-Trump.
Yep.
But he makes the point that we will be down at the Mexican border handing out applications. We will be, one thing we see as a trend in Canada is, in Canada, they will adopt technicians from the Philippines. Mm-hmm. And do you see in the future where we're setting up vocational schools for technicians in the Philippines, in Mexico, we're supporting those schools? I think we could go to Toyota and get them to donate cars.
Oh,
we could go to International and get them to donate, we could support.
Yeah.
But when they come over, the thing we've noticed in Canada is when those technicians move from the Philippines to Canada, their goal is to get their family over. Their loyalty to those dealerships is they're not jumping around for another $1 an hour.
Right.
They're not looking for a signing bonus. They are so loyal that the business has supported their work visa, so they can't really.
Right.
They're not going anywhere for a
Exactly.
while. Do you see a time where we, and maybe we're doing it together, where we're getting lawyers, we're setting up like a Tinder for technicians, and we're going down there and working with vocational schools, setting them up, and then giving our clients first dibs at those technicians?
Well, I think I could see us getting to that point. And I think that if we don't, as a nation, our nation that we live in right now, figure out that we stop having to use vocation as a dirty word, and we stop, preventing people from entering that side of the workforce, that's going to be our only hope.
But hasn't that train already left the station? How do you turn that back?
I think I'm finding in certain areas some real glimmers of hope where they've turned it back around, and now we're getting a lot more people through that training again. But we've for so long we've told everybody 4-year degree or you're not going to be successful. We don't want to listen to them say that, oh well, I like to use my hands. They don't care.
And you're going to go into $100,000 worth of debt.
Yeah. There's an interesting company out there, and I know Wyotech uses it, and I think it's in a lot of different parts of industry, called Love Trades. And I'm definitely not an expert at it, but I did get sort of an introductory meeting of it. And they're using this stuff in kindergarten and early schooling, and it's basically an aptitude test. And when they find that somebody has an aptitude to work with their hands or put things together and take things apart, they're able to sort of shift focus on some of their schooling to make sure that they foster that. And then we get to the point where, we get to high school. Now, maybe we can't afford to have vocational shop in that one school, but we're having vocational schools that 4 or 5 high schools tie into, and that's getting big in Oregon, and I know it's getting big across the United States. So I think there's some things that are very positive to maybe stem the tide on everybody going away. But your point is well taken, and I think it's something that we have to look at very seriously. Are we going to turn this thing around quick enough to get a lot more entry-level candidates into the system, or are we going to just have to say, hey, the work's still there, we need bodies that can do it, and then what do? We look elsewhere. But yeah, kind of a scary thought in a way, but we've definitely not done ourselves any favors with what we've done to vocation in this country.
I think for a long time, because you bring up an interesting dynamic in all this, is that we're looking for kids that are kinesthetic with their hands. That's where they get their reward, right? They're challenged they're the ones putting the erector set together, the Legos, that sort of thing. For the most part, a lot of the technicians in my career that I've got out of the vocational school are more auditory and visual. They're good at taking tests. They're good at the online in the courses, but they're not as kinesthetic. And they're not looking to get their hands dirty. And so we're promising these kids are going to make $100,000 a year, and they think they're IT guys coming out, and they're not thinking that they're going to get their hands dirty.
Right.
And I do think that doing it before we recruit them, who we're pushing into the schools, that's an important qualifier. Because how many times have you got a tech out of vocational school and they don't like to get their hands dirty?
Plenty of times.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. Absolutely.
And to that, I think that you almost have to change the testing for those schools, right? Because I think that I would guess that the tests are auditory, right?
Yeah.
Or they're going to be written word or anything like that, but it's got to be kinesthetic testing
absolutely,
too.
Absolutely. I think that's
a lot of the better techs aren't the ones that are going to pass the test with flying colors.
Correct.
But if you show them,
and they can do it.
They were the kids that were tearing an engine apart in high school, but they weren't reading a book. They, I
kind of get excited when I see, a candidate that, has a farm background. On a family farm, they had to fix something.
They were in the field fixing a tractor.
That work ethic is the other thing, whether it's a farm kid or any kid, that work ethic is something that it's hard to teach that. They have to be submersed in it early on and want to get the job done. We're reaching out like crazy to veterans organizations as well. They tend to do real well in the shop type of environment where there's a certain mission. There's certain steps that are taken to get that mission done, and those guys, you can pretty much plug and play anywhere in the country. They've been everywhere. They're not, there's certain areas, Hawaii for one, where if it's not a native going back to Hawaii, I certainly want to see a pretty drawn up plan as to why that person thinks they're going to be able to succeed over there. And want to
without getting island fever.
Yeah, it's definitely fun for a week or two, But yeah.
But living there's a whole different world for sure.
Absolutely.
What else do you see in the future?
Well, so there's, I think it's been coming for a long time that we're looking at technicians now to actually have some sort of customer service. There used to be those walls and there used to be those signs that say no customers beyond this point because of insurance or whatever else. I think those days are gone. The customer is much more educated. The customer wants those answers from a technician. And now we're moving into the no more brick and mortar part of our business. Everybody says that they wish the mom and pop shops were everywhere, but I guarantee almost all those people shop Amazon, right? They just don't say it. Well, Lithia is bringing on Driveway now, and now we're moving out of just the sales part of it, and we're going to bring that into service, where they can reach out to us online, set the appointment, we pick up the vehicle. Everything is communicated electronically. We'll have video. The text actually showing the customer, this is what I found and why. And they're having to be part of the customer service. So that's a whole new skill set, that a technician's probably going to have. And it breaks my heart, but the days of having all the service writers seem to be dwindling now. We've got the kiosks and everything else. I have my own personal feelings about that, but the customer is going to dictate to us how they want to do business, and we have to be the first ones to the market on that, or we'll get left behind. So.
Interesting. I don't know if you remember, but that was a conversation we had 7 years ago.
Absolutely.
Was, will advisors exist?
Yeah.
And could we run it without? Because it's a big chunk of personnel. Sure. I mean,
Absolutely.
I tell people all the time when they're talking about their advisors, and I can't get them to do this and that. I'm like, listen, if your results would be better if the customer pulled right in the shop,
you don't need them.
It's your fault.
Absolutely.
Why are you allowing somebody to work for you that isn't improving the communication,
right?
Isn't communicating with the customer and making the process better? That's why we added that level of personnel, that 8% of gross or whatever. We're spending a lot of money there. If it isn't making the process better,
exactly, then you certainly have to look at it.
Yeah.
And we have some pretty big shops, and the ones that have kiosk, I think it takes care of that customer that wants to drop their car off before opening and be gone. Maybe that's one of the customers that throws you the keys and says, "Hey, take care of it," right?
Yeah.
But I think there's still a mix. There's still a reason for an advisor to handle those customer service issues and to, like you said, to actually talk to a customer, and then you find out that's an $8,000 job, right? I'm pretty sure a kiosk isn't going to,
there might be a conversation warranted, maybe.
Just a little bit, but a lot of that's, like I said, it's going on the technicians now as well. And with that model of talking to the customer electronically and showing them what's going on electronically, I think that technician does have to have a customer service, some skill set. Maybe not as great as a seasoned advisor, but it's coming.
Yeah, I don't see that any different than what happened with doctors and bedside manner. So the medical industry was completely transformed with malpractice suits.
Sure.
And then their ability to get malpractice insurance. And what all the insurance companies went out and did is they tried to figure out, like, why is Ed here killing somebody's son and he doesn't get sued, but Tom over here hasn't killed anybody and he gets sued constantly. And it all came down to bedside manner.
Absolutely.
And it's all about how it's delivered, and it's also the time, like, spending more time with each patient, not, kind of like we do with advisors. We think they can write 40 ROs in a day and be successful.
You're not going to make relationships with that. I mean, you can't. There's not enough time. And I think that's,
But the techs are the parallel to that. They're the doctors. They're the ones driving everything. Nothing exists without the techs. We could do it without the advisors. We could do it without a shuttle driver. We can't do it without the tech.
No way.
And so they are over time going to have to learn bedside manner. But the thing that's always surprised me when we do like clinics, right? Like say you do a big Saturday clinic and you have the customers go in the shop with the techs. I've always been blown away by how even the techs that you're like, keep them away, they clean up and they're fathers, they're husbands, they're like everybody else.
Absolutely.
Just because, they have a different image to us. When it's a customer, they usually have pretty good bedside manner.
Yeah. And it's improving constantly. The customer's more and more involved in everything. That's the way we're
and it'll dictate. They'll have to. It'll just be part of it.
Yep.
But yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that's a really good insight into that. Okay, so we I think we've covered a lot of stuff, but maybe the last thing we should dig into is recruiting advisors. What do you see changing there in the last 7 years?
That's a great question. So there's some questions that I have my recruiters when they're talking to a service manager to make sure that they understand the answer. So I think recruiting advisors is a little bit behind recruiting techs, whereas most service managers, they always just want plug and play. You know, if you tell them, the first thing they'll ask, do they have CDK experience, right? And I think that now they're figuring out that that's wrong. You know, we were passing around a lot of bad advisors because they can figure out the computer. So now I always ask my service managers, and I have my team ask, are you recruiting for personality or experience? And you know that they should be recruiting for personality. So we steer them that way a little bit. And then we look at other, retail customer service venues to find the right person. And a lot of times you'll find that diamond in the rough where that person's never gonna get rocked. That person's gonna have a smile on their face and gets off on solving problems for a customer. And now they find out where instead of making $15 an hour at Starbucks, they can make $150,000 a year at writing service. So sometimes those are just like hit them out of the park. So just where we're looking, where we're recruiting, and where we're trying to find people, how we do it. We're giving service managers a business card that maybe doesn't look like a Lithia business card. It says, would you like to do these things? And they can hand it out when they're getting a coffee, or they're talking to somebody at Nordstrom's or wherever else it might be. I think there's that adage, always be closing, ABC. I say ABR, always be recruiting, and it can't be just my team. It has to be the service manager. It has to be other people that are in that store at all times. So we coach them a little bit on when they're out and about in the city, what they're looking for, and they might find a winner.
Yeah, and Christian says this all the time too, but it can't be when you need somebody.
Right.
Always be recruiting.
Gotta have
means
a farm team.
Yeah.
Well, we've actually just brought on a new position called a service administrator, and that person kind of wears a lot of hats. So they do a little bit of BDC, answer calls. Maybe they're cashiering in the few places where we still do some cashiering, but in the back time, they're learning writing internals. They're learning to write in that part of it, and then they get moved into wherever it goes.
So there's a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah,
Well, exactly. I was gonna say, not to lie, but it totally sounds like a made-up position for the dealer's nephew. I'm like,
son-in-law.
Right.
Boy, we've seen
We're
a lot
gonna make
in
you the
acquisitions.
service administrator.
Yeah. In
There's
acquisitions, we
gonna
find
be
a lot of those.
a guy tomorrow. His name's Joe. He's gonna be there at 8. He works for you now.
Yeah. He's gonna need
What does he
he's gonna
do?
need a shirt
Whatever.
and a
He'll
name
do whatever.
badge. Yeah.
But make the title nice.
Yeah.
It's nice being publicly traded where we don't fall into that as much.
And when I
anymore,
say
but
8 o'clock, I mean 8:22.
No, you know where you
Lot
see
of
that.
ish.
You know where you see that though, is in the acquisition,
Oh man.
where there's like the mistress on the
Oh,
payroll.
God. And
all
then
these
you're
people.
looking at the pay.
family.
Yeah. Huh. Well, it's an interesting last name. How it matches the one on the door.
Yeah, but there's 6 of them or whatever. Or when you go pull back all the demos and all, like,
Yeah.
I've seen that in acquisitions before, where there's like 5
Yeah.
women
Yeah.
with demos that
Yeah. There are some interesting things that come up in that for sure.
It's funny.
It's usually like a 90-day washout, and then we'll figure out who our crew is going to be sometimes.
90 days. That's the magic time, I bet.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for doing this.
God, I sure had a great time. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, Lithia's on the move too. Like if you're looking to get in a company where you can make a difference and move up and have a career path.
Growth powered
you are
by
in the
people. That's our mission
acquisitions,
statement. It's
right?
For sure. Oh yeah, for
You
sure.
guys are growing
growing
fast.
very quickly. Yeah. So
And Lithia just might be your boss because they buy where you work.
we'll make it better. I promise. We'll make it better. So.
Great job. See you guys next time on Service Drive Revolution. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Service Drive Revolution. We're uploading new stuff every day, so make sure you subscribe and click the bell icon so you don't miss out. If you have a question you'd like us to answer on the show, Call 8333-ASK-SDR and we'll answer your question on the show. That's 8333-ASK-SDR. For special deals on our books and training, head over to offers.chriscollinsinc.com. Now that's offers.chriscollinsinc.com. I'm Chris Collins, and I'll see you in the next video.